May Jesus be praised and onward with Mary. A good and holy day to you all, my dear children, in the sacred hearts of Jesus and Mary, in the most chaste heart of Saint Joseph. Welcome back to our morning feature, Saints and Coffee. I don't like this spot they gave me last minute, thinking now might be better near the tree and nativity. But oh well, maybe. Let's ask the director to put a short break in the broadcast. Actually, let's put the theme tune back on while I move. This setting isn't very Christmassy, but these things were done on the fly. You wouldn't believe the circumstances. Right then, director, please put the theme tune back on. Yes, here we are again, live, my dears, and finally, with a few more Christmas decorations, because I was moved from my location, and here you can see more clearly that there are only 2 days left until Christmas.
Eccoci di nuovo in diretta, carissimi, e finalmente con qualche addobbo natalizio in più perché ero spostato di sede e così qui invece si vede maggiormente che mancano 2 giorni al Natale. Allora,
So today's Monday, the 23rd of December, and we're just a stone's throw away, you might say, from the Christmas celebrations we'll be having the day after tomorrow. To tell the truth, tomorrow evening, with the Christmas vigil, we'll really get into the spirit of it, of the Holy Christmas of the Lord, which celebrates the arrival, as I said last night in the Father Answers section, of the Lord amongst us. So, this week begins, one of the most important of the liturgical year. Last night I gave the schedule. I'd like to remind you of it again. Meanwhile, I'd like to remind you of the evening appointments, as Radio Domina Nostra's schedule continues peacefully with the prayer rhythms you know well, especially the 3 rosaries. Holy Mass every day at 8 o'clock, even on Christmas Day, St. Stephen's Day, and so on. The 8 o'clock Mass is essential. Then, however, this evening at 9 o'clock, there will be the 8th day of the Christmas Novena of the Lord. Here, we're doing it together. It's lovely that we're preparing for Christmas together with this novena. I said so a few days ago. During the liturgical year, I cultivate a couple with you. Then my personal ones are another matter, but with you, it's essential for me to do that one with all of you, the Divine Mercy, as you know, from Good Friday. What's that noise, please? From Good Friday to Holy Saturday, which precedes Low Sunday. Then certainly the Immaculate Conception, the Novena of the Immaculate Conception, and this one of the Infant Jesus. Sometimes I've said we'll also include the Assumption, but since it's in the summer, it's not always done. Tonight at 9, on this 8th day of Christmas Novena, I should mention, or it may seem neglected, that one needs wisdom to grasp these things. I know that the priests with brothers of the Sodality are traveling around from Sardinia to Rome, from Bologna to Assago, and I'm receiving images and testimonies. Why are we changing strategy? Fools surrender, wise ones know our cause. Because I could easily show you now how many people were in Rome yesterday for Don's Mass. I won't say who, you understand. Get ready. From this moment on, slowly, Radio Domina Nostra continues its schedule, but it will be the chats that activate. That's where you have to draw from. And the enemies will also arrive there. But they won't be able to say that we do things openly, as they say, to provoke our stuff. In my house, I can dress however I want, as long as I respect the external rules. In my house, I can dress however I want. All right? This is so it's understood, right? So thanks to Father Johannes, to Don Enrico, to Don Ramon, especially to those three who had a great time yesterday. I've received the photos. Right then, right. So tomorrow, which is Christmas Eve, I'll at least outline the plan for the next 3 days. Tuesday the 24th, Wednesday, the day of the Lord's Christmas, and Thursday the 26th, St. Stephen's Day. So tomorrow, 4:30, we'll broadcast it on the 9th day of the Christmas Novena, and at 7 o'clock there'll be a live stream titled The Sodality for Christmas Greetings. That is, we priests will be online, greeting the faithful of the little remnant and wishing them a Merry Christmas. We come to Christmas Day itself next Wednesday, the day after tomorrow, at 8 o'clock. There's the Solemn High Mass. At 12 o'clock, live on the radio, the live greetings segment, especially from the children. A short film is ready. I'll show you. Right then, get ready. Let's meet on Christmas Day at 12 o'clock to give our blessing too. It'll be a half hour, 3/4 of an hour live. Then we'll bless everyone's meal. A short film's been prepared for this. Let's see if it's ready from the director. We'll put it on air, this exceptional feature. Next Wednesday, Christmas Day at 12 o'clock on Radio Domina Nostra, live Christmas greetings. The title is Christmas Greetings, live on Radio Domina Nostra. Anyone who wants to call in to offer greetings is welcome, but it would be lovely if they called on behalf of all the children. At 8 o'clock there's Mass, then in the afternoon, at 6:30, the Rosary and Eucharistic Blessing, and at 9 o'clock, Domina's Catechesis on the birth of Jesus.
Questo è l'appuntamento allora dopodomani alle ore 12 a Radio Domina Nostra, gli auguri in diretta. E poi alle 18:30 ci sarà il Santo Rosario con la meditazione breve, la benedizione eucaristica. Questo mercoledì 25 dicembre. Andiamo a giovedì 26 dicembre, festa di Santo Stefano, protomartire, alle ore 8 la messa. Poi nel pomeriggio alle ore 18:30 rosario e benedizione eucaristica, alle ore 21 la catechesi di Don Minutella, la nascita di Gesù.
Let's think on that there. Share the post. Share. If you've nothing to do and want to burn off some panettone, bechamel sauce, and all that creamy pastry stuff, see you at 9 p.m. Thursday the 26th of December, then Friday the 27th, and Saturday the 28th. We'll discuss that later, otherwise we'll never finish. Right then, so today I'm going to talk to you about something rather interesting. And what do you want? Ready for Christmas? We're getting ready for Christmas, but there's Herod. Right? Let's not forget that Christmas isn't a children's fairy tale, not a preview of Walt Disney. Because sometimes there's a risk. Of a somewhat sugary, fairy tale, romantic vision of Christmas. I'd say, and I'm a bit biased, that you can't exclude this dimension because however you look at it, the angels singing in heaven, the shepherds, the pastors going to adore the baby, the cave. Christmas needs to be framed within the appropriate theological context. John the Evangelist gives more than all others. John, as we know, doesn't recount Jesus as a child. He presents him already as a grown man. Why? Clearly because, as the exegetes unanimously believe, even if there's some disagreement, they essentially think that since Mark, Matthew, and Luke, well, not Mark, Matthew, and Luke, recount Jesus' birth, development, childhood, and the preceding events, there's no need to do it again. John, therefore, omits this account of the infant Jesus, of Jesus as a child, presenting him already as an adult. But there is the prologue. Chapter 1, what we read every day at Mass, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So then he gives the theological framework of Christmas, when he says, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it, or did not overcome it. And then he says he came among his own, and his own did not receive him, they rejected him. So Christmas is like this. There's Herod. There are the highest, let's say, the boundaries within which the Son of God is placed are hyper-dramatic. We want to do it. I'm referring especially to those of you who have followed the Christmas novena. We want to begin with the indifference of the vast majority. I was calling it something else. Can I say it? Obviously, the blatant lack of faith, because indifference is still elegant. Blatant lack of faith means I couldn't care less. And so the inhabitants of Bethlehem, seeing the signs in the heavens, seeing the Magi arriving from Jerusalem, each continued to do what they had always done. So there was no room for them in the inn. So the first condition of the Son of God who comes is not worship, grateful, moved, heartfelt welcome, in the style of St. Francis of Assisi. No, it's every man for himself, because we have work to do here. What do you want from us, this human consortium we've formed? We're already well organized. That's quite interesting. This is indifference, or if you prefer, blatant disregard. But it doesn't stop there. Christmas also provokes more violent reactions, like that of Herod, who had all the children, as we know, from 2 or 3 years old and down, killed because he wanted to eliminate the Son of God immediately on Satan's behalf. Jesus Christ came to earth almost suggesting a kind of willingness to allow Satan's dominion over the earth. He'll specify it. St. Augustine makes an interesting reflection in the Gospel of John. Jesus says, "No one takes my life from me, I lay it down myself," to indicate that he is divinely constituted, the divine second person of the Trinity. I don't know if I can explain it well and make myself understood, but he, as a divine being, eternally proceeding from God the Father and God like the Father, no one can take his life with a snap of the fingers. He also says this to Pilate, if you remember. Don't you know that the power to take your life, to leave you free, you would have no power over me if it had not been given to you from above? That is, there's an availability. I brought this text by von Balthasar with me, but I won't have the time. It's a divine availability to aggression, human and demonic, for love. Christmas time. God deliberately makes himself weak, but in this weakness lies the greatest resource of divine omnipotence. Divine omnipotence doesn't lie in overpowering. If it overpowered, it would be too convenient, too easy. Remember that advert from a few years back that was so successful? Do you like to win easily? No? No. Instead, God's omnipotence is manifested in the mode of weakness. And you think, the Church, which is the bride of Christ in these 2,000 years, how has it always ended up? Victory is always through martyrdom. Victory is through persecution. Victory is through humiliation. Victory is through the cross. That's God's logic. So there are the indifferent ones, and then there's Herod. Then there are also the high priests, the establishment, nothing different from the current one. Today I'll talk about Cardinal Sarah, still preparing my cartridges, and then I'll fire. Nothing different. The high priests, the temple scribes, would be today's Bergoglian cardinals, especially the worst ones, those who play at being saints. Is a cardinal, or a pseudo-Bergoglian cardinal, at least he's properly papal, more appreciable than these Sarah-like cardinals I'm talking about today, who play dumb, don't notice, look, They don't notice. Anyway, let's get back to us. Herod wants Jesus dead. He wants him dead. And so he has all the children under 2 or 3 years old killed. In my book, which we'll discuss, He Became Flesh, I examine the exegetical and biblical details. Essentially, around 400 children should have died if I remember correctly. Just a detail. What I'd like to say, however, is this. We are witnessing God's arrival, God's entry into human history. But not enough, says von Balthasar. We would be able to consider this theological absolutum, that is, God who comes to earth, but not in the manner of Greek mythologies, to take a stroll and enjoy the spectacle of the Thanatoi. In Greek, the Thanatoi are mortals, as the Odyssey says. He comes to become a Thanatos, Thanatos also being death, and he comes to partake in death. This is Christmas. It's something absolutely amazing. We'll all truly understand this. We ask the Madonna to help us understand it better and better. Here, within this context, I place the dramatic situation of the Catholic Church. Views on perspective. There's one churning out petitions, latest one to Cardinal Amato. An elegant letter, Your Eminence, here and here. Sooner or later, you'll see that someone will receive one. They'll be forced to do it, and victory will be sung. But is that really the case? That's a serious question. Right then, today's topic is why, amongst these cardinals, I've chosen to focus particularly on Cardinal Robert Sarah. Why do I do this? Why? Because he's just released a book he wrote. Please, could the director show the book cover? There it is, in Italian, published by Cantagalli, and the title is, Does God Exist? It's an interesting title. This book examines the question of God in a Ratzingerian way, I'd say, in our time. It's a well-made book. The subtitle is The Cry of the Man Who Asks for Salvation. Here the title is God Exists. The subtitle, or rather it's part of the title, The Cry of the Man Who Asks for Salvation. Who is Cardinal Sarah? He's an African cardinal appointed, I believe, by Ratzinger, who for years was there with Ratzinger in one of the most important roles in the Vatican dicasteries, namely prefect of the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments, in short, the liturgy. Why did Robert Sarah immediately connect with Pope Benedict? Because Pope Benedict spoke of two important things for the liturgy, which for us, but for me naturally, are indispensable. The first is the hermeneutics of continuity. That is, we don't go back to the past. But in fact, when Benedict XVI recovered the ferula, the crozier shaped like a cross belonging to Blessed Pope Pius IX, or when he wore the Camauro, I believe that's what it's called, the hat used by John XIII, or when he reinstated the sedia pontificalis and sacred vestments of the past, he didn't do it out of vain vanity. It's always a strategy, that is, the Church accepting the challenge. Look, it's extraordinary, Dad, the Church accepting the challenge of modernity because it's essential. This confrontation, however, doesn't relinquish its own identity and doesn't completely break with the past. It removes those formal things that aren't necessary. Dunno, right? So hermeneutics of continuity, because the Bologna school, the innovators, the modernists speak of a hermeneutic of discontinuity. The Second Vatican Council as if it were the beginning of a new era, even harming the Council, because if you look at the Council, apart from some communication problems, because as Benedict XVI said, but here I'm straying too far, there was a problem between a real historical council and a virtual council. but we'll talk about that another time. I discuss this in my books. What's important to say is that the hermeneutic of continuity, Pope Benedict's, is, pay attention, a reform of the reform. That is to say, there was a liturgical reform that went too far, Pope Benedict said, when he was a cardinal. Between the 70s and the 90s, this reformist drive in the liturgy went too far. So the Pope, who was still a cardinal at the time, hoped, as a theologian, interestingly, he's not a liturgist, he's a theologian, but it's something for liturgists. As a theologian, he thinks liturgies for theologians, not liturgists. Because liturgists are extraordinary, but have a constitutive limit. They absolutize the liturgy. And so theologians can suggest things to the liturgy, liturgists a little less. Anyway, that's a different matter altogether, reforming the reform. Ratzinger foresaw that this reform was necessary, but that the reform itself needed reforming because it had gone too far. In this reform of the reform, Ratzinger, with Sarah was the wingman, Ratzinger was the midfielder, and Sarah was the striker, foresaw a possibility. Sarah actually talked about it. If you look for it, you'll find these statements by Sarah. Now, if Pope Francis lives as he does, namely that the Vetus Ordo liturgy is the Novus Ordo liturgy, at some point they'll have to meet. Don't tell the traditionalists, or they'll decapitate you, like Muslim jihadists, because they're fundamentalists about this. A meeting might be possible. I met Sarah personally a few years ago with Father Leonardo, with Don Leonardo. We went to deliver a statue of Our Lady. He received us, and he spoke precisely of this need for a meeting, because it was the period when we weren't discovering the traditional Mass, the ancient Mass as it's called. However, for example, as I said yesterday, there are some aspects of the ancient Mass that could benefit from certain openings. For example, a broader Word of God. Those who come from Novus Ordo and joined Vetus Ordo miss this. Because in the Mass you have the first reading, and the Psalm is also very beautiful. In the Vetus Ordo, there's the gradual. This singing of the Psalms during Mass is really lovely, very lovely indeed. The Gospels vary constantly, you see. There are a few details. Sarah's been doing this for years, supporting Pope Benedict in areas that were absolutely untouchable, because they were held particularly as outposts and strongholds of ecclesiastical Freemasonry. Then, after Benedict XVI resigned and the Amazon Synod took place, Ratzinger and Sarah wrote together, a sign of further collaboration. They wrote together, From the Bottom of Our Hearts, a book published by Cantagalli. Interesting, Cantagalli, like Pietro, who keeps publishing, pretending nothing is happening. Pope Francis, however, pretends nothing is happening. If you hear Sarah's hypocrisy, I'm not truly unforgivable, especially someone who was beside him and betrays for goodness sake, renounces Pope Benedict with this apparent strategy, which is a subterranean strategy. We pretend nothing is happening. Then we'll talk about it, we'll solve it another way. So Cardinal Sarah wrote this book with Ratzinger, a collaboration. Why? Because somewhere the possibility was emerging that the Synod on the Amazon would overshadow the issue of priestly celibacy in the countries. And so that book there, which I refer to with extensive excerpts from one of my latest works, A Church, Where Are You Going? That book there, Pope Benedict, caused a scandal, a casus belli, precisely because, naturally, the establishment found itself with its back to the wall, and the Pope Emeritus and the prefect, ex-prefect of the liturgy together. It's a heavy, heavy thing for the enemies, no? And this should have made them reflect, because the containment strategy, or the pact of desistance, leads nowhere. Part Anyone expert in military policies and the history of wars will know about the attempt, first by the Italian army, and then the Austrian one in the Friulian areas and so on, to find a moment to desist. And this risked, it made them risk a great deal, because how do you play the desistance card? You can never know if the enemy is truly willing to a period of pause, or if instead they're regaining their strength, reorganizing. And many times, in fact, those who know history know that so-called periods of desistance anticipate the fiercest clashes. Got it? Because both armies pretend to do it for friendship. So, let's meet halfway, really. It's because we're short of ammunition, and it's on its way, you see? And then, so many soldiers have died, more are arriving. Let's say the human material is also arriving. And so right now we are open to dialogue. It's all false, a pack of lies, and this is the falsehood of the non-Bergoglian cardinals. You can count them on the fingers of one hand. And obviously, since they're all getting on in years, I'd like to point out, with all due respect to those who think differently about the future of the Church, that Sarah, amongst others, won't be able to enter the conclave, the next conclave, unless it happens very soon. Unless it happens soon, because he's in his 80s. It's as if cardinals are excluded from the conclave as soon as they turn 80. Right then, so Sarah wrote that book, and chaos erupted. It wasn't just a desistance agreement anymore, but a full-blown military response. A military response in which Pope Benedict, with the style that always characterized him, wanted to dot the I's and cross the T's. A total response that Bergoglio and the false church couldn't immediately push through, as they'd hoped, because it seemed a done deal. Under the pretext that there aren't any priests in the Amazon, they ordered married priests, married lay people, nothing more happened because of that book, and Sarah paid the price because he was marginalized, isolated, and so on. Then Pope Benedict died. What did Sarah do? Where's the real Pope dead? Why not say, I wouldn't want them to actually think, as I believe, that Bergoglio is the Pope. But didn't he speak with Pope Benedict? I don't think so. On such a delicate matter, I'll say what I think. On this delicate matter, Pope Benedict, for me, didn't discuss it with anyone. Why? God willed it so. Look, you have to look at Benedict XVI as one of the greatest mystics in the history of Christianity. He's the fourth shepherd of Fatima. He fulfills prophecies. Ratzinger needs charisma, not just logos. They pull him to Logos' side, the smart pope, refined scholar. But that's not all. He wouldn't have done what he did if he hadn't also had the mystical dimension to understand that the time had come to obey God. Like Saint Joseph, who takes a pregnant woman as his wife, who is not pregnant by him, and must trust in God. And so Joseph, and it's no coincidence he's called Joseph, puts his trust in God. So he didn't discuss it with anyone, because it was a private decision that he left to God's will. I don't rule out that Ratzinger already knew that it wouldn't be the cardinals, etc., who would resolve the matter. I can't go into details, but for me the fact is that he later spoke of a small remainder. He stepped in when needed. But now back to Sarah. Sarah today is, in my opinion, the quintessence of the hypocrisy of these cardinals. The book mentions the church later on. Read. This also concerns the church's meaning and mission, which must not be reduced to that of a generally religious body, subservient to the new globalist ethics promoted by the United Nations. Ah, he's saying it! Luke is saying it. Come on. Let's start the countdown. 10, 9, now he says it. He must say it. Say who he means. And adds that they prefer ecology to eschatology. Come on then, he's saying it. Come on. Thinking he was helping him. Wait. No? Do you remember Andreotti? A strong church on the most mainstream issues. My word. A major statement, he says firmly. He has to say it, excuse me. Otherwise, it's best to say nothing at all. She's weak and almost fearful in announcing Christ as the only Savior of the world. We're stingy with the treasures of faith we have within us. People don't evangelize anymore. We're afraid of being called proselytizers, or even fundamentalists, or disrespectful of other religions. Will you tell me? Like when Nanni Moretti told D'Alema to say something left-wing and say you're talking about Bergoglio, say at least it's Pope Francis, if it's really the Pope who's sponsoring this. If it's not hypocrisy, then all you've got is Father Minutella and those brothers of his. What do you want? It's a pitiful sight. But if God has other ways, what can we do if these cardinals are paralyzed? It's like Monsieur Schneider. He's been saying for years, there's a draft decision coming down from on high. I've looked into it. I'll write a book. I've realized it's the construction firms that are renovating the Vatican. The bricklayers, the poor unfortunates who bring their mortadella sandwiches and climb to the 12th, 15th floor, or even the dome of St. Peter's. It's them. They have a plan of destruction, the powers that be, the higher-ups, but you have to name names. Mafia. I'm Sicilian, now a Palermo resident. When I was your age, I was there when Falcone was blown up. And yes, I used to travel from Palermo to here. So for a long time we had to detour onto the main road, like a war zone. And then after 2 or 3 months, Borsellino, why were they blown up? Because they had, ready with names and surnames, they had worked tirelessly on the truth itself. And they blow us sky high. 17th of December, boom. Don Romano reduced to the lay state. Borsellino, 5th to 6th of May, what was it? Boom! Don Bernasconi, stripped of priesthood. Borsellino dalla Chiesa. May 2022, Falcone blown to smithereens in Domina, reduced to a legal state with 2 excommunications. It's the Mafia's church, so these big cardinals, remember Addio a Tavola? The cardinal, when he pops up, the cardinal. They're hiding. Shoulders? Got it? You were wrong. If my shoulders are stiff, they're cheating. So they want to be clever with God and play games with their conscience. Do you know why they play games with their conscience? Like Sarah, because he can't manage to be like Bergoglio. He can't stay quiet till the end, fearing they'll lose their soul. So what do? Oh, they throw it into absolute mysticism, like Comastri talking about Mother Teresa of Calcutta, the saints. It's beautiful to listen to him, but he's a cardinal. It's a shame he didn't notice when he was an archpriest. I, however, don't trust them anymore. I don't trust them. Then you see, I don't trust these cardinals, these names to pray to. They're worse than the Bergoglian themselves, because they're doubly responsible, and Sarah plays this game. I remember, back in the 90s, I was a seminarian. Falcone was blown up, then Borsellino. That was the year I entered the seminary, the very same year, in fact. The following year, after I'd finished my first year, Father Pino Puglisi was blown up, murdered, I mean. At that point, the Mafia, well, I'm saying it's not us who are getting blown up, you see. Let's highlight the fact that, all things considered, it's a monster with feet of clay. Because if this establishment were truly confident, they wouldn't resort to these stupid acts of utter stupidity, reducing things to excommunication, issuing pronouncements. But who has the time to keep issuing excommunications to these people? Do you see what I mean? And I remember that there were priests around at that time, anti-mafia priests, who, as they say around here, caused more of a fuss than the priests working on the front lines. Father Pintacuda, Padre Bartolomeo Sorge, the Mafia, thanked them. Why did they thank them? because these guys were putting on a show, speaking out against the mafia without ever naming names or being direct. So the mafia didn't touch them. These cardinals like Burke, their priests like Father. Oh my goodness, look at them today. They're the anti-mafia priests like Father Pintacuda. Useless, useless. The mafia, or rather, finds them to its advantage, because in some way, there's always someone who speaks ill of the mafia. But you mustn't name names, like in Corleone, when the boss went by and everyone spoke badly of the Godfather. The Godfather's here, kissing your hands, your most obedient servant, I am. And it's the same here, the top brass are reporting it. The upper echelons, but poor people. And that's why they'll answer to God, who doesn't have a clue what they're talking about when they discuss a project, like Sarah was saying about the church, which is becoming ecologist, globalist, syncretist, and which pleases the global mainstream, but it's all about who's speaking. You're not in the church. And adds, let's make the church a human and horizontal society that speaks a media language. My friends, such a church interests no one because it's unable to fill the emptiness and void of Western society, etc., etc. It's a church ultimately priva of God's light. The commentator writes, a merciless diagnosis, yet far from lacking compassion, quite the opposite. Sarah says, I speak this way because in my heart, as a priest and shepherd, I feel compassion for so many disoriented, lost, sad, anguished, and lonely souls. You're irresponsible. Can't wash your conscience clean. There's no commercial product to wash away guilt. The cardinals in canon law are here, but time's short. In fact, the Code of Canon Law states that cardinals are the first collaborators, and that in an anomalous, contradictory situation, they should be the first to intervene. And all things considered, I understand this when there are people, even on the sidelines, in the sense that I don't know, neither against me nor with me, because they say, Sunday you're great, it's a shame you're not a cardinal, I would have followed you, because there's a rightful expectation. I can even understand this, because it's a historical thing. Anyway, cardinal, with such people, what can we expect? This one's washing his conscience clean, finishing a beautiful book in the style of Comastri, talking about God, spirituality, liturgy, silence, prayer, and meanwhile in Rome there's Satan with horns, and they don't see him. It's truly monstrous. It's simply dreadful. This aspect here. It's the energy of planes, the power of damage. Why don't they notice who's in Rome, what they're doing? How can Fra Celestine and I know, but not Cardinal Sarah? Do you think Cardinal Sarah has no doubts about who Bergoglio is, about what he's doing? Then, him in Poland. Just so you know, I know things. I don't tell you everything, because then you'd get discouraged. Sarah seems to be keeping the anti-Bergoglio Polish church unit under wraps. But you see, the Poles, who really know the score, trust her. And even the African Catholic enclaves that didn't approve the Fiducia Supplicans find Sarah a point of reference. But in what terms do you become a point of reference? If you don't tell the whole truth, what's Bergoglio got to do with the Pope? You know it's not the Pope, though he was there. I remember, in 2013, Cardinal Robert Sarah entered the conclave. The hypothesis we can put forward is that he wasn't aware, because certainly, to launch the attack brilliantly and elegantly, a couple of cardinals. So I think Comastri, for example, I don't know, anyway, they didn't know the plot that was unfolding. They presented Bergoglio as, since there was the blessed tired one who didn't sleep, and therefore withdrew, they needed a witty person with a strong character. I remember the beginnings. I appreciated Bergoglio's beginnings. I don't know about you because we didn't know him. We knew nothing. The early days, apart from a few unfortunate remarks. But when, for example, he decided not to follow all the ceremonial and I said that was a clever choice because a pope can't get lost in 1,000 tributaries. He has to focus on the essentials. There's a book by Romano Guardini, cited by Ratzinger, in which Guardini prophesied our time and said it's possible that Ratzinger got the idea of the small remnant from Guardini. It needs further investigation, but I can't do everything. Go searching. In Guardini's collected works, if he wasn't the first to speak of a small Catholic remnant. Why? Why? Because he predicted Romano Guardini, a German theologian, despite his name because he was of Italian, Gredo, origin. Imagine that both von Balthasar and Ratzinger drew heavily on, gleaned many insights from Romano Guardini. Romano Guardini was undoubtedly the one who, even before Ratzinger and Paul VI, foresaw our times and said that the Church, this is how he put it, should arrive at essentialization. Not about small change, I think, Grandpa. I haven't read Guardini's text. Other things by him, yes, but not that one. He talks about essentialization, a category that Ratzinger takes up again in the interview book with Vittorio Messori, the salt of, what was the interview book called? Ah, yes, Report on Faith. And there Ratzinger actually quotes Expressis verbis Romano Guardini, who envisioned a minimalist church. What does essential mean? Essential means aiming for the essential, removing all the fluff. The church has become weighed down. Romano Guardini saw this before the council. So then when Bergoglio first started, because I saw that at a certain point all the ceremonial rituals were getting on his nerves, and I found this positive because I said, well, and a pope who finally spent a lot of time with the people, the poor, who could ever have imagined the deception. But then gradually, over the years, these 12 years we'll be celebrating in February, we've been taught by continuous confirmations of the Church's dramatic situation and its profound contradiction. And no one did anything. They just made a few They just hinted at a few frightened attempts to shout something, but they didn't go all the way. They believe Bergoglio's the Pope. So I remember that Sarah, who speaks so well, so saintly, entered the conclave of 2013. Acquit him? I think so, because we can't know whether he knew or not. Now, next one. Assuming he gets there, what will he do? Who does he celebrate with? For he celebrates the deaf gift. Do those who sign requests for help know that Sarah has mentioned Pope Francis's name every day at Mass for 12 years? Will it have had devastating deleterious effects? Because on the other side, they don't understand much about spirituality and God's grace and things about me. This political and legal drift is worrying. And this great question, there's a station trying to snatch it from its rightful Sicilian place. If you plant an oak tree on the beach, my love, they're trying, I don't know if you get what I mean, to take the great question from its rightful Sicilian place, and that dominates the first position, that theological. They're trying to move it from here to the beach, that oak tree to the beach. Canonical law and appeals to cardinals aren't resolved like this, for obvious reasons. It can't be resolved like this, because there are so many contradictions they pretend not to see, because we also understand canonical law, and so it's not true that we've spurned the canonical route. That's a downright falsehood, a dishonesty they'll answer for to God, because some people fall for it. And yet, let's say the issue is much broader. It's actually theological in nature. You need the paris, as I write in my books. That is, you need God's light to understand the situation we are living through. The situation is this. There's the devil in the Vatican. In recent days, the Madonna wept at La Salette. Right, I can show you an image, but even here, with the benefit of the doubt, it's tripled, cubed, compared to La Salette, where the weeping seems to be genuine. That is, in the last few days, between yesterday and today, a couple of people sent me a post saying that, in all likelihood, a painting, an icon of the Black Madonna of Częstochowa, has wept. And if it were true, my dear children, there's much to consider and always to verify. I read naturally. The image of Our Lady of Częstochowa with a tear in her eye in the Archcathedral Basilica of St. Stanislaus Kostka is located behind the altar. I visited it. According to information shared by the faithful, there are believers who have witnessed this in Krakow. The first time tears appeared in the image of Our Lady was around the 13th of December last year, so more or less shortly after the shovel. One of the priests who was there touched the image and discovered that there was a wet drop in the eye. The place will see more updates soon. It wasn't mentioned at all on social media, nowhere, while La Salette, well, it's so prominent, thanks to the director, it's shocking. This image is shocking, if it's true. Our Lady of La Salette is weeping. Our Lady of Częstochowa is weeping. There must be a reason. The Madonna's tears always announce something big. We are called to live this Christmas, my dear friends, as it is, a little cold, not climatically, spiritually. Humanity is adrift. Humanity is adrift and lost. Humanity is without a sense of God. Dark clouds loom on the horizon. Putin isn't joking. We know that. There's a people, the Russian people, ready for martyrdom, for self-sacrifice. The Russian people must be understood. On this side, we have a West to ruin, drenched, because there are no more moral values. LGBT ideology always predominates. Those things there, we have to bow our heads every time to all this. So the Lord is coming, but apparently the Madonna is weeping. She's crying because the situation is dramatic for the world and tragic for the church, a church that's split, but Jesus is the hope. The light shines in the darkness. It doesn't come easily. I'll conclude with something. Yesterday was a very intense day for me, my first day back. Something happened last night that you don't know about, a structural issue forcing us to move suddenly from one place to another. We don't know quite how to do it. The situation, and I was thinking of Bergoglio, Fernandez, the Masons in the Vatican in general. Why? They're truly wicked because they're never uncovered. They have to appear to be showing mercy. But you're joking. He's the Pope of dialogue, of the poor, of the oppressed. How many people are deceived by this? But they persecute us with the worst Soviet criteria. And I thought I'd had such a moment, but then a person said it had to be solved. The light shines on the stages. If we weren't so attached, considering how many attacks Domina suffers from such a small remainder, it couldn't come out that we are in Christ's light. We could be the hope. In an alternative proposal, a completely different one, we could be the solution. Darkness. My God always allows it, remember, what seems bad to our eyes in our daily lives as a general thing so that the light may shine. No light without dark. Phainein in Greek, tophos, phainein and Scotia, in the darkness, in the singular, in the darkness. That is, the world of darkness is the Hebrew tehom, that is, the abyss, when before creation there was this formless, chaotic mass. The light arrives and beholds, the light arrives and shines. Light shines bright, so then be brave, because Christmas is the festival of light. The light shines in the darkness. Let's not lose heart. Let's press on, waiting for God to intervene so that, with His intervention, we can say we've made it. And this hope that sustains us is the final image that, well, I'll revisit in the 8th episode of the Novena. Sharpeghi talks about hope as a small virtue. He sees two queens arrive, walking with solemn, slow steps along an elegant path, and between them a little girl playing with her feet, kicking pebbles, skipping, held by the hand of the two queens. When he sees them, he knows the truth. The child isn't led by the queens, she's leading them. The two queens are charity and faith. But charity and faith without hope and childlike virtue. Because childlike, because it's always written something new. Here I wanted to read you this passage. It's very beautiful. In the way he presents himself and in the announcement of Jesus, a youthfulness is revealed that encompasses the self-awareness of full hope. He himself is the fire. Those who listen ask him, "Who do you think you are?" No wise man ever bound other men to himself as he did. Jesus only shows a path that leads to God, to infinity, to the absolute. And this path is not identical to himself. Baptist's wisdom, etc. He is and remains his Son, a Son who cannot be distanced by growing up, because in every now, always, eternally, he is crucified and begotten. He has always been, but his being is an ever-young, fresh, childlike being. The little child of man separates from his parents, to grow, to generate, and to grow old. However, the divine child, even when sent into the world, is instead always the fruit that springs from the bond with the Father. That's why he remains a child, because a child stops being a child when the adolescent starts to claim, we've all been through it, autonomy from their parents, sometimes traumatically, sometimes not. Anyway, he claims it and so on and so forth. And when this detachment begins, life begins, leading to old age. Instead, it says with Balthasar that the Son of God didn't claim autonomy coming into the world. This detachment from the Father intensified it. Therefore, he remains eternally a child. How lovely. Let's stay small children too.